The Prince of Wales has led commemorations for the 75th anniversary of VJ Day, when Japan's surrender ended the Second World War. He joined veterans and military personnel for a service at the National Memorial Arboretum in Staffordshire. Prince Charles paid tribute to the courage of those who fought in the Far East, saying their service and sacrifice would echo through the ages. And he remembered all those whose lives were blighted by the conflict. Here's Nicholas Witchell.
A lone piper at dawn aboard HMS Belfast, marking the fact that 75 years ago this morning, the world awoke finally to peace. In the open spaces of the National Memorial Arboretum in Staffordshire, a carefully choreographed commemoration, attended by 40 veterans who fought in the 14th, sometimes forgotten army, against a ferocious enemy in some of the most challenging of conditions. Many tens of thousands of Allied troops from many different nations lost their lives in the jungles of Southeast Asia. Tens of thousands more died in Japanese prisoner of war camps.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
After the sounding of the last post by a Royal Marine bugler, a 2-minute silence was led by the Prince of Wales. And in remembrance of lives lost from so many nations, from British, pre-partition Indian and other Allied armies, wreaths were placed at memorials here and in many of the nations which were involved in the conflict.
Today, in this hallowed place, and in the presence of all those gathered here or in their homes, wherever they may be, let us affirm that they and the surviving veterans are not forgotten. Rather, you are respected, thanked, and cherished with all our hearts and for all time.
75 years on, the forgotten army was honoured. Nicholas Witchell, BBC News.
Well, 50,000 British and Commonwealth troops died in the war against Japan, half in prison camps. Some of their relatives joined surviving veterans at the Memorial Arboretum, and our correspondent Sian Lloyd was there.
96-year-old Joan Berfield, known as Jonni since her Navy days, one of the remaining few who remember VJ Day because they were there. She was then a Wren, aged 21, stationed in the Far East and tasked with decoding signals, one of a group of young women who'd joined the Navy to serve their country. 75 years on, she hasn't forgotten the most important message she came across.
We were receiving signals, you know, from all over the place. And somebody just shouted, "It's over. It's over, the war's finished." But we still had to carry on.
For Sergeant Francis Rayleigh, the Japanese surrender signalled the first steps towards freedom. Like thousands of others, he'd endured years of suffering in prisoner of war camps. His daughter's proud to be here today.
He was taken captive by the Japanese and taken to Sumatra, and he was there for 3.5 years, where he saw the most horrendous torture of people. He was lucky that he didn't receive, too much bad treatment in that respect, but it must have been horrific for him.
Gosh, if he was here today, he'd say his buttons would be popping off his chest. That's just how he was. He'd just be thrilled to be here.
It was an event to mark an historic day.
It's been a lovely service, and that has brought back lots of memories of especially when they talked about the prisoners, because those men, they were half-starved, could hardly walk.
Remembering those who finally brought the Second World War to a close. Sian Lloyd, BBC News, Staffordshire.
Japan's emperor has expressed deep remorse today for his country's wartime actions at the ceremony in Tokyo. Emperor Naruhito expressed hopes the ravages of war would never be repeated, while Japan's Prime Minister said his country now consistently values peace.
75 years ago today, the Second World War officially ended with victory in Japan. The Queen led tributes to all those who fought so valiantly to end the global conflict. VJ Day, Victory in Japan Day, came 3 months after victory in Europe, a delay that led many of those who fought in the Far East to believe their plight was a forgotten war and their suffering a forgotten sacrifice. In Japan, Emperor Naruhito has expressed his deep remorse over his country's wartime actions. Neil Connery reports on the ceremonies here and around the world that have taken place in memory of all those who gave their lives for peace.
Dawn on board HMS Belfast, and 75 years on from the day World War II ended, a lone piper played battles over. Above the National Memorial Arboretum in Staffordshire, a Battle of Britain flypast marked VJ Day. The Prince of Wales and the Duchess of Cornwall here for this anniversary service, as veterans heard the Prime Minister mark the 2-minute silence.
At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
Prince Charles spoke of the sacrifice of hundreds of thousands of Allied and Commonwealth personnel.
All too often, those who fought in the Far East have been labelled the forgotten army in the forgotten war. Many of the soldiers, nurses, and other personnel felt anger and disappointment at how they were treated when they finally returned home.
Among the veterans supported by the Royal British Legion here, Sydney Pidgeon spoke to the Defence Secretary Ben Wallace about the risks they faced.
You're young and naive. You don't think about things. I mean, there's 1 or 2 occasions when we got the wind up, but you don't think about it. To me, it's what you do.
3 months after victory in Europe Day, VJ Day in August 1945 marked the surrender of Japan after fierce fighting, bringing the Second World War to a close.
Then, in his own time, Lord Louis entered and indicated that they could sit down.
Lord Louis Mountbatten was Supreme Allied Commander in Southeast Asia and accepted the Japanese surrender. A montage of veteran pictures released today included a photograph of Mountbatten's nephew, Prince Philip, who was a young naval officer in Tokyo Bay at the time. In Japan, Emperor Naruhito expressed his deep remorse over his country's wartime actions, saying he hoped the tragedy would never be repeated. 3/4 of a century on, for those whose lives were changed forever, remembering VJ Day has never been more important. Neil Connery, ITV News.